This is a short but straight to the point and unfiltered account of Jennifer Lee Wilson, the woman who weighed 340 pounds and sat on a 10-year-old boy, crushing him until he passed away. In a quiet Indiana neighborhood, on a spring day that should have been ordinary, a tragedy unfolded that would shake the conscience of everyone who heard about it. It wasn't a car crash. It wasn't a school shooting. It was a foster child, just 10 years old, whose life was crushed, literally, under the weight of the one adult he should have been able to trust. His name was Dakota Stevens, and the perpetrator of this horrific act is named Jennifer Lee Wilson. Dakota wasn't a rebellious kid. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't violent or unpredictable. He was a 10-year-old foster child, about 86 pounds, in weight, maybe 4'10" in height. Just a small, vulnerable boy with no real place to call home. He was under the care of Jennifer Lee Wilson, a woman who stood at 4'11" but weighed 340 pounds. Her house was licensed for foster care, and at the time, she had multiple children under her supervision. Jennifer Wilson had previously been trusted by the state to care for children, but that trust would prove to be tragically misplaced. On April 25, 2024, tensions escalated over something seemingly mundane chores. Dakota, like many boys his age, resisted. A disagreement turned into something darker. Dakota told a neighbor that he had been physically abused by Jennifer Lee Wilson and her partner. That same neighbor offered him a temporary refuge and even said she'd be willing to adopt him. Dakota, desperate, took shelter there, frightened and pleading not to go back. But Jennifer Lee Wilson certainly wasn't going to let that happen. She tracked him down, forcibly brought him back to her home, and in the most grotesque twist of adult dominance over a child, decided to teach him a lesson. What followed defies all reasonable understanding. Wilson restrained Dakota by pinning him to the ground, not with her arms or legs, but with her entire body weight. She sat on him, pinning his chest and neck to the floor while he struggled beneath her. She later admitted to sitting on him for at least 5 minutes, though some surveillance footage suggests it was longer. She called it punishment for acting bad. But this wasn't discipline. This was torture. Imagine a 340-pound adult pressing down on an 86-pound child, on his ribcage area, his lungs, his airway, slowly compressing, inch by inch, second by second. In the background, a Ring doorbell camera captured the sound of Dakota screaming, struggling, and eventually falling silent. He was not resisting anymore. He wasn't even moving. After minutes of complete restraint, Jennifer Wilson finally noticed something was wrong. Dakota wasn't moving, and he certainly wasn't getting up either. She reportedly nudged him and asked, "Are you faking it, you little rascal?" A chilling sentence that tells us exactly what she thought was happening. But Dakota wasn't faking. He was unconscious, his body pale, his eyelids bluish. By the time Jennifer Lee Wilson realized the gravity of her actions, it was too late. She attempted CPR and called 911, but the damage had already been done by her 340 pounds of weight. Paramedics arrived and rushed him to the hospital, but his body was shutting down. 2 days later, on April 27, 2024, Dakota Stevens was sadly declared dead. The autopsy was grim. It showed that his brain had swollen, his organs were damaged, and there was clear hemorrhaging around his chest and neck, classic signs of mechanical asphyxia. His small lungs were crushed before they could even develop fully. The bruises told a tale even Jennifer Lee Wilson could not deny. The official cause of death was eventually determined. It was homicide by mechanical asphyxiation. In other words, he was suffocated to death by human force. Once the story became public, outrage swept across the community, and eventually, the nation. Jennifer Lee Wilson was arrested in July 2024, 3 months after Dakota's death. The charge was reckless homicide. Many sensible persons questioned why the charge wasn't murder. Some argued that sitting on a child for minutes, Ignoring their screams and motionlessness couldn't be anything but intentional. But prosecutors went with the lesser charge, citing a legal gray area between her intentions to punish and her outright intention to take the child's life purposely. Wilson's foster care license was immediately revoked, and the other children in her home were removed. Investigations revealed that Dakota had complained about being mistreated prior to his death. But like so many other children in the system, his cries were ignored. In October 2024, she pleaded guilty, avoiding a jury trial. Some said it was to save face. Others believed it was a strategic move for a much, much lighter prison sentence. On January 17, 2025, Jennifer Lee Wilson was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but only 5 of those would be served behind bars, with 1 year suspended and served under probation. Jennifer Wilson will spend just 5 measly years for ending a young boy's life. Dakota Stevens' death is not just a singular event. It is a reflection of a system that failed him every step of the way. From placing him in the hands of someone clearly unfit to care for children, to ignoring prior complaints, to sentencing the person responsible for his death to a mere half-decade behind bars. Every single adult in Dakota's life failed him. He ran to a neighbor and begged for help. He was scared. He wanted to live somewhere else. And he was sent back into the arms of his killer. Let's be clear about this. Dakota didn't die because of a freak accident. He died because someone chose to sit on him, deliberately, oppressively, and long enough for his tiny lungs to give out. His death didn't happen in a war zone. It didn't happen in a gang neighborhood. It happened in a suburban home, under foster care inside a system meant to protect vulnerable little children. Jennifer Lee Wilson used her body as a weapon. She silenced a child who had already been abandoned once by the world, and then again, fatally. And now, the world moves on. Jennifer Lee Wilson will one day be free again, out of the confines of her prison cell. But Dakota Stevens will never grow up. He'll never ride a bike again, never go to high school, never learn to drive, never fall in love, never have his own kids. All because, for 5 to 7 minutes, a grown-ass, oversized woman sat on his little chest and crushed the life out of him. Justice isn't just prison bars. It's reform. It's oversight. It's listening to children when they cry for help. It's making sure no child is placed in a home where fear outweighs safety. Dakota's death should never have happened. Rest in peace, Dakota Levi Stevens. You should still be here. You deserved much, much better.